Hey, welcome back. I'm Carissa, and this is my Master Gardener training series. My training just began in the month of January, and so far I have loved it. So I will link below the entire playlist of this series so you can see which other topics I have covered so far. So today's topic is woody plants. Our last episode was on herbaceous plants, so that would be anything without a woody stem. So they are opposites. A woody plant, by definition, produces a structural tissue, the wood or the bark, and thus it has a hard stem. So that is the most basic definition of what a woody plant is. So in that category, we obviously would have trees and shrubs. Within the group of woody plants, there are trees, shrubs, and vines. The vines are actually called lianas, and that would be a type of vine that does develop the woody stem. Not all vines do produce that woody stem, so there is a difference in that. Okay, and then they are further grouped into deciduous and coniferous. Coniferous comes from the Latin compound of conus, which means cone, and fer, which means to bear, which means one that bears cones, which I found really interesting. Deciduous is from the Latin deciduous, meaning falling down or off. So that reminds us of the leaves that drop, right? That would be a maple, your fruit trees, that type of thing. We've really been encouraged to get to know the Latin language. It is an ancient language, but there are so many benefits to understanding just where those root words came from, and it helps us to further identify our plants. So within the category of trees and shrubs and all woody plants, there is a lot of versatility, and our presenter really encouraged us to sort of seek out what plants we really enjoy, what we are drawn to, and sort of make it work within our landscape and just understanding the plant and what it needs. I think sometimes when we think of trees and shrubs, we feel a little bit restricted, when in fact we are not restricted. It is just the limit of creativity that we have that restricts us to growing these plants and shrubs. She encouraged us to look into container gardening with even trees and shrubs. Some trees and shrubs actually do well in containers. And she was a presenter who is from Vancouver, which is a few hours west of us. And, you know, it's a more urban, dense area, and people more commonly do use container gardening in their landscapes or apartment patios. So she just wanted to remind us that we are not limited. We can definitely find a spot for trees and shrubs, whatever your landscape looks like. Another thing to consider is sun and shade, right? I think most of us think, oh, that the tree has a large canopy, it's going to need lots of sun, when in fact there are lots of different varieties that will do well in sun and shade. And of course, another restricting factor we sometimes think about is size, when in fact a lot of trees have been either cultivated or they just naturally can stay a little bit tidier. They're a smaller, more dwarf tree, and they're coming out with new ones all the time. And of course, colors and textures. I think if we think all trees are green, that is a very limited perspective, and trees come in all different sorts of colors and textures, and really the sky's the limit. And then we went into some benefits of growing trees, and I think most of them are pretty obvious, right? We have a lot of sentimental value with a lot of the trees. Maybe our grandparents had that tree growing up. Maybe you have a special memory when one of those certain trees was flowering. They can definitely evoke different sentimental feelings and emotions within us. And of course, they're beautiful. That's another benefit. Even studies show that being in nature, being in the presence of plants, definitely helps us eliminate stress and just have a more positive mindset. So there's beauty and lots of benefits to having trees and shrubs in our lives. Another benefit would be environmental benefits. They have the ability to take in that carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen, which is what we need. Trees and shrubs even moderate temperatures. They can conserve water. They also produce a habitat for wildlife. Another reason to have trees and shrubs would be economical. They can even help you to save in your energy bills, providing you choose the right space for them. They can shade your house, eliminating the need for air conditioning sometimes if you place them in the proper spot. Of course, property value. If you think about curb appeal and what people like to see in a landscape, in a property, usually a couple trees will not hurt your property value. In fact, it'll probably increase your property value. So being mindful of a few certain things when you are selecting a tree. Say you have an area of your yard and you're just really excited to throw in a tree. It's important to keep these different things in mind. So form and size. When designing with trees is a big commitment. It's a big cost. It's a big effort to get that tree in. So it's important to think about what you're looking for in your landscape and what goal you want to achieve with that tree. So different forms and sizes are the pyramid style, full crown, vase, fountain, spreading, layered, columnar, and weeping. And I'm sure you can picture a few of those in your mind right now, but a quick Google search would bring up a lot of different images. And just being aware, right, if you're planting a hedge, right, there is a specific tree for that. That's probably a columnar tree for that, for a hedge. If you are wanting to shade, you're probably looking for a full crowned tree. If you have a lot of herbaceous plants already planted, maybe you want a weeping tree so that you're not going to be sacrificing some of those plants already in your garden. So just keeping in mind the different forms and sizes that trees and shrubs come in is going to be very helpful when designing your garden. And further into tree selection, I think there are 5 questions, at least 5 questions. These are just some of the questions you could be asking yourself when you're choosing the tree for your space. The first one is, what kind of soil do you have? Does it have good drainage? All of these things are important because the health of your plant is determined with your soil fertility, the proper drainage that tree specifically needs. Another question is, where are you located? What is your zone? Are you sunny? Are you windy? Are you prone to different climates? All of these things are important to know because I think placing the right plant in the right space really gives you the best foot forward when you're designing a healthy, beautiful landscape. The third question would be, what is your property and space existing? What do you already have? What are the structures in your yard, right? What's going to shade out that tree or maybe block it, or what's going to absorb a lot of water anyway? Maybe you have a willow that's already hogging a lot of the water. Other plants and trees that you already have existing and you want to work around those. And fourth, what kind of maintenance do you want to commit to? Some plants are extremely needy and they need a lot of help. So be mindful when you're choosing a tree, what kind of pruning, what kind of maintenance, what kind of fertilization that you want to be giving that plant. And lastly, do you deal with a persistent pest or disease? Even keeping that in mind will help you a lot. Keeping that in mind will help you a lot, just managing your time and what you're willing to commit to. If you want to be spraying, every month in the summer, then all the power to you, but some of us do not want to be doing that. So just keeping in mind what you're already dealing with and then adding in from there, I think is a really good idea to start your design process. Okay, you are ready to go to the store, you're ready to purchase. Timing. When is the best time to be planting a tree and a shrub? Like I said, it's a huge time commitment, it's a huge effort, and it's usually a huge cost typically to buy a large tree. So you want to be sure to do it in a dormant, not an active growing season. So spring or fall on a nice cool day, overcast, would probably be a great time to plant your shrub or tree. Quality. I talked about this in herbaceous plants. Making sure you're buying from a reputable source, a good local nursery where they will provide you with that specific information you need about the tree you are buying will really inform you in the right way. As far as roots go, there are 3 different ways to purchase your plant with the root system. Typically it's in a pot, right? It is in soil, in a pot, and it's very manageable. But there are 2 other ways as well. So you can buy a ball and burlap. Sometimes there's even a wire cage involved, and those are typically for the larger trees, and that's just for ease of transport for them, for the supplier. So they are wrapped in twine or some sort of wire cage or burlap, and the root ball is all wrapped up. So that's typically done for larger trees. And then you have bare root. I've done a few bare root, mostly roses, and they are so easy. They're a dream. It is inexpensive to ship these plants, so usually you're getting a little bit of cost savings, and it's very easy actually as well. There's a few disadvantages, of course. The roots are exposed, so you're limited in your timing. You kind of have to get them in the ground. As soon as they arrive, you've got to get them in the ground. But it's definitely a good option. And then the last thing would be to prep your space before you bring your tree home. These trees are not growing in their best condition when you were buying them, right? It is a stressful situation for them. So you want to have your site ready to go as soon as you're bringing your plant home. So, stake out your area, make sure you've got a good spot, make sure that your area is prepared and ready to go for that tree so that you can bring it home and get it well established without stressing it further. All right, now the basics of planting your tree or shrub would be to water it while it is in its pot. So those pots can dry out so quickly, so to make sure that those roots are very moist before planting is a great idea. So dig your hole about 2 times larger than your pot, not the depth, but more of the width. That will make sure that there's a little bit more aeration going on in the soil, a little bit more room to play, make sure that your trunk is straight and that type of thing. So depth, like I said, we're not worrying about too much depth here. We want to make sure that that soil level is consistent with how it was potted in the nursery pot. Typically it's done correctly, but be careful. There's something coming up that I'll warn you about. So planting it too high, your soil level too high will rot your trunk, and that is a recipe for disaster, obviously. It'll kill your plant, so don't plant it too deep. Another thing would be to girdle, which is cutting your roots, or to just tease them lightly if it's not too root bound. This just sort of creates a new pattern for the roots and allows it to break free of its typical growth pattern. If you come across some broken or damaged roots, I would cut them off, because the plant will be sending energy into trying to heal that root system, when actually there is no point in that. It is better to just cut it off and start fresh. So once you place your tree in your hole, you are going to be mixing it with fresh compost and your native soil. Try and do equal parts of both, just so that you're not shocking the plant too much. And as you're doing that, you are backfilling and compacting it slightly, either with your hand or lightly with your foot stepping on the soil. If it is a huge tree, you can even be watering while you are doing this. But a good deep watering after you've compacted the soil is a definite must. And lastly, staking. Staking is only necessary if you are in a windy area. If your plant came with a stake, you can remove it. You don't necessarily need it. And especially moving some of those plastic wraps that are attached to the trunk, that will deter growth. You want to remove those as well. So remove that and only stake if necessary. Not all trees need to be staked. So when I was talking about soil depth, I said make sure that you're not covering the trunk. Also, another thing to consider is your root flare. So root flare is the point where roots begin and spread from the base of the trunk. So you will see it. It's almost like, in elementary school when you're drawing a tree, and it's sort of that soft angle just at the bottom by the soil. That is the root flare, and you don't want to be burying that either. That will rot and quickly kill your tree, so be mindful of that. And even when you're mulching, do not cover the root flare with your mulch either. I would stick a few inches away from the base of your tree from using your mulch. Pruning. Pruning is a huge topic, and actually I think we're going to have a whole presentation on pruning. But even still, knowing your plant, doing a quick Google search, when does my clematis need to be pruned? I think most gardeners are aware of the complexities within clematis. But knowing the timing of when your plant will flower or fruit will really give you a good idea when to prune. So no one can give you a good solid answer unless you are specifically asking what type of plant you are growing. So this is a stressful process for your plant. I mentioned in the herbaceous plant video that pruning back your plant while you're planting it actually deters plant growth and stresses it out further. The hormones needed for root development are produced in the leaves. So removing the leaves will actually deter root development, if that makes sense. So don't further stress your plant by pruning it while you are planting it. I would hold off a year or two before you're going to start pruning your brand new tree. So a good rule of thumb for pruning is dead, diseased, or damaged. If you have any of those, then definitely remove that branch. Another thing to consider would be airflow. So if you have multiple branches that are crowding each other out, usually you would want to remove one of them, and that's a good rule of thumb as well. Okay, so throughout this presentation, our presenter was a landscape designer, and she just encouraged us to really look at plants and choose our favorites based on a few different aspects. And it was a good challenge for me, actually, because sometimes you can look at a tree and think, oh, I love that tree, it's beautiful. But really, what is it that makes it beautiful to you? I think it's really helpful for us when we start to design our gardens to really specify what aspect of the plant we like. So as we went, we talked about different factors and different elements of deciduous and coniferous plants and what we really liked about them. And then she listed a few of her favorites. So like I said, this was a Vancouver presentation, which is 3 hours west of us. They are in a totally different climate than we are. They can grow things we cannot, and vice versa. But for my zone, so I'm zone 4 or 5 in BC, Canada, we get really harsh winters, but also really warm summers. So plants have to be pretty hardy to live in our climate. But here are a list of a few of my favorite woody plants. So the first one in the top left corner would be a Colorado blue spruce. I think there's just something so rare about that blue evergreen look, at least for me. I live in the forest where there are, you know, numerous Douglas firs and ponderosa pines, which are that beautiful, deep, rich green. But this little pop of blue is just so unexpected, and I love it. And of course it's evergreen, so that's another aspect I like about it. And then the other one would be my cherry tree, and you can see this little squirrel snacking on it, which is whatever, it's neither here nor there, but I really like the cherry tree. It was a nice surprise. It was nice to come to this property that was new to us, but it already had these fruit trees planted, and I really enjoyed the cherry tree. And then below that is a clematis, and that is a Jackman clematis, and really any clematis I love. They are just such a beautiful understated plant. They come in so many different varieties. I've added at least four clematises to my garden last year, and I'll probably add some more this year. Clematis are definitely one of my favorites. And then beside that is the Poet's Wife David Austin rose, and this one smells incredible. I was on the hunt for many years to get a plumeria because I love plumerias. They smell amazing. And I couldn't get one. I started one from seed. I got a shoot and it didn't work. I have one now, but it's dormant, which is fine. It's winter. But I've yet to have a bloom from it. But anyway, the Poet's Wife by David Austin is an amazing smell, and it's almost as good as a plumeria. And roses are just stunning in general. And then below that, I sort of have a mix of different ones. And when I was new to art, when I was new to designing gardens in my own yard, I came across the rule of adding yellow, burgundy, blue, and green, and how that is just such a complementary color palette to your garden. So this image has a maple, a red barberry, a blue star, mini juniper, and then it's got, of course, the dark green junipers behind it. And I just love those colors together, and I think they all look really, really nice together. And beside it is a Annabelle hydrangea, and really any hydrangea I love. They are just such a beautiful plant. It's been a nice surprise too because they are more deer resistant than I thought they would be, so I've really enjoyed adding hydrangeas to my yard. And then below that is the Lady of Shalott David Austin, and that one is also beautiful. I love how the color changes. It's a little bit more bright orange in this picture, but as it sort of ages and matures, it goes to a more subtle apricot, and it's beautiful. So that is my summary on what we learned in our woody plants training. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really, really excited to continue in my training. My next video in this series will be fire-resistant landscaping. It's a challenge we deal with here in BC. I know Oregon, Washington, California, Alberta, which is the province next to us, and wildfires have been out of control in the last few years. So it's definitely a good consideration for us gardeners to make our gardens more fire smart. Anyway, that is all for today. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.